Welcome back to your AMT Standard Bank weekly fresh produce market update. Fresh produce prices are taking farmers on a roller coaster ride at the moment. Potatoes dropped another 8% last week to just 36 Rand. That's 43% lower than a year ago. Onions, tomatoes, carrots and pepper prices also came under pressure, while a few fruits like apples and grapes are holding steady. With demand shifts at month end and high supply still on the market, what lies ahead for producers and consumers? Let's take a closer look. Proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa Crop Protection. Before we start, please do me a small favor and subscribe to our channel. It will help us a lot to improve the content and make sure we bring you all the latest information on a weekly basis. Potato prices dropped another 8% the past week to 36.40 per 10 kg, down 43% from last year. Weekly volumes, however, dropped off by 2% week on week, but remained about 25% higher year on year. Extra large potatoes traded at 45 Rand, large at 41, mediums at 34 and smalls at just 24 Rand. Mondials also came under pressure, dropping to 37 Rand, while Cifras reached 42 Rand per 10 kg. We are moving towards the end of the month, which is likely to support demand over the next week or two and hopefully support prices as well. Producers are under severe pressure at the moment on these price levels, and it can hurt production into the next season as well, so something to keep an eye on. At the moment, however, supply remains extremely high, which will limit any drastic upward movements for now. We are still following a similar trend than in 2022, and if we continue on that trend, expect prices to bottom out in October or at least stay low until October and recover slightly in November and December. Onion prices dropped to 54.02 per 10 kg, down 8% from last week and almost 7% lower year on year. Volumes increased by 2% last week and is now about 5% higher year on year. Large onions traded at 54 Rand, mediums at 61, extra large on 50, while the latest small price stayed on a lower level of 34 Rand per 10 kg. Brown onions averaged on 51 Rand, white onions on 54 Rand, while the latest red onion price increased to 124 Rand per 10 kg last week. A slight price increase is expected over the next week due to better demand expected on the markets, but prices are still expected to remain in a longer-term downward trend towards the end of the year due to higher supply levels that is also expected. For this week, however, demand can support prices slightly. As mentioned last week, tomatoes decreased sharply the past week to 6.45 per kilogram, down 24%, while volumes jumped by 17%. The average price is now 41% lower year on year, while volumes are also 41% higher year on year. Large tomatoes traded at 6.92 Rand, extra large on 9.41 Rand and mediums at 6.83 Rand. We expect better demand this week, especially towards the weekend, to support prices slightly. But supply to the markets this week will play a major role in how much prices will rebound. It sounds, however, like supply will remain on extremely high levels, which can keep prices at current levels. Tomatoes are very perishable, of course, so the heat in the northern production areas can result in supply to come to the markets more quickly and supply to remain high for now. But it can also create a shortage in a few weeks' time. So expect prices to remain low now, but possibly increase in a few weeks' time when we can see shortages. Carrot prices dropped sharply again to 4.80 per kilogram, almost 9% lower the past week, and is now 2% lower year on year. Large carrots traded lower on 5.17, while mediums dropped to 4.11. Smalls traded on 2.55 per kilogram. Supply now caught up with the previous season supply levels and therefore drove prices downward and is likely to keep prices on a lower level over the next month or two as well. For this week, however, better demand is likely to stabilize prices. This video is proudly sponsored by Villa. With world-class solutions like Masterlock, tailored for South African conditions, Villa helps you manage risk and increase productivity with research-backed confidence. Pepper prices dropped off by 19% to R22.59 per kilogram due to 6% higher volumes over the past week. This price is however still 31% higher year on year. All varieties also came under pressure, with green peppers now on R18.95, yellow peppers dropping to R27.91 and red peppers lower on R25.83. We're still on a similar price level compared to 2023, when volumes also remained on a lower level. If we remain on a similar trend as in 2023, we can expect prices to trade sharply lower from September until November, when volumes started to pick up, which drove prices downwards. Cabbage prices dropped by 8% to R2.44 per kilogram, while volumes increased by 1% week on week. Compared to a year ago, prices are now 45% lower, while volumes remained about 13% higher. Garlic prices increased to R70.62, with a local garlic on R71.33 and imported garlic on R68.94. Expect garlic prices to remain in a downward trend for the remainder of this year. Spinach prices dropped by 17% to R2.55 and is also likely to stay on a low level until October. Sweet potatoes increased to R4.83 but is still about 39% lower year on year due to 61% higher volumes compared to a year ago. Pumpkin prices dropped by about 2% to R5.24, which is now 90% higher year on year. Pumpkins can stay on a higher level until October and possibly start to decrease in November again. Visit AM Trends for our latest reports, detailed charts, and free downloads. You can also click the like button if you enjoy this content. In the fruit markets, we saw banana prices dropping by 5% to R7.84 per kilogram last week. We're still on a similar price trend than last year, when we saw prices shooting up from this point towards the end of the year. It however remains to be seen if volumes will also drop sharply, but I think a higher price is likely over the next 3 months. Better demand over the next week can also support a slight upward price movement. Apple prices kept its strong upward momentum and traded 4% higher on R11.63, which is now about 11% higher than a year ago. We're still expecting a gradual upward price movement towards the end of this year. Pears also increased by about 1% last week and is now trading on R9.83 per kilogram, which is about 6% lower than a year ago. Pear volumes are almost 23% higher year on year, limiting any upward momentum at the moment, unfortunately. Based on our forecast models, volumes will likely drop off from October onwards, which can support prices over that period. Orange prices decreased by about 1% to R5.01 and is now about 14% below last year's price levels, with local volumes up 38% year on year. It looks like we are moving away from last year's price trend, staying on a slightly lower level this year, which can be due to less exports and more volumes that needs to be absorbed on the local markets. From September to November, we usually see prices trending higher as volumes start to decrease, but expect the usual increase in price to be slightly later this year due to more local volumes expected. Avocados decreased to R22.01 per kilogram and is still 16% higher year on year. Volumes are about 11% lower now compared to a year ago. Viertes traded at 29, Haas at 18 and Pinkertons at R22 per kilogram. Prices are still well above the levels of the past few years. From August onwards, we usually see prices trending upwards towards the end of the year, so expect ours to become more expensive as the local supplies start to decrease. Grapes traded sharply higher on R88.04 per kilogram, jumping to 10% above last year's price levels. Pineapples decreased to R6.08, lemons jumped by 10% to R5.47, while blueberries dropped off by 20% last week, now trading on R110.18 per kilogram. This episode was proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa. For more detailed insights and forecasts, visit amtrends.co.za now. I'm Dr. Johnny van der Merwe. Thanks for tuning in and see you next time.